Hello, friends. Welcome to the Reasonable Truth Podcast. This is your host, Prashanth Daniel. It is good to be back again. And I have a guest with me today that I've been looking forward to having for a long time. And I've followed his work very closely. This is Dr. Tim Orr. I'm just going to read a quick little bio of him. Dr. Tim Orr blends academic scholarship, ministry, and personal transformation with over 30 years in cross-cultural ministry. He serves full-time at Crescent Project as the Assistant Internship Director and Area Coordinator, leading UK training and outreach to equip Christians for effective engagement with Muslims. He also serves part-time as a research associate at the Center for Study of Religion and American Culture, where he focuses on congregations and polarization, examining how faith communities navigate division and cultural change. He holds 6 degrees, including an MA in Islamic Studies from the Islamic College in London, and taught religious studies for 15 years at Indiana University, Purdue University, Columbus. Dr. Tim Orr, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Fantastic, fantastic. You know, as I was saying, I have followed your work over the last year or so, and I don't even know how you started showing up on my algorithms, but I know that we have a few mutual friends, people we know, and so you know, it's guilt by association, if you will. And so I started seeing some of your work about that time, and I, as someone from kind of a Muslim background, I was very intrigued by a lot of the things that you were saying. And so I remember thinking almost 6 months ago that I wanted to have you on the show. And so I'm glad we finally connected over the last month or so. And it's good to finally have you here on the show. We have so much to get into. I have so many questions for you, but I want to start with this, just so our listeners can know a little bit about you. Give us a little bit of your story, just a little bit of your background, and what brought you into this field of studies and scholarship and so forth.
Yeah. I think, I came to know Christ at when I was 21 years old out of alcoholism and that kind of situation. And God really saved me and transformed me, called me into ministry not very long after that. I went and planted a Hispanic and African American church in East Chicago, Indiana, about 5 years after that. And I really got a lot of great experience. Probably the experiences were more powerful than the successes. I was still in my 20s. I was learning. I hadn't been to seminary yet, but I wouldn't trade that experience for the world. Because through your life, you really develop your calling. You find out more about yourself, more about your calling, and so on. And I was in pastoral ministry, but I always had a passion to win the lost. And to share the gospel. And that was almost day one of my salvation. And, but I learned to, I also had a passion also for learning. I remember early on in a conversation with a few pastors saying, I just feel like God has called me to be an educated minister. Guys like Ravi Zacharias and others really impacted me, and I began to develop that gift. But my passion or my ministry can be characterized by there's an academic side, but a pastoral side. And so I try to mix the two. I try to have that sort of ministry and so on. But how I got involved in Muslim ministry was completely by accident. It was the sovereignty of God. It was never on my radar. I had been doing ministry for years. I was invited at the local high school to come in and serve as a panel member on world religion. And on there were people, different people of other faiths. There was one that was a Muslim. And so I said, you know what? I've never had a Muslim friend before, and I'd never been shy, so it wasn't a big deal. So we went out to lunch, and I began to kind of get to learn about him. He got to learn about me. As a matter of fact, we kind of hit it off, and I had him come to my house. And after dinner, he said, "Would you like me and some my friends from the mosque going to go fishing? Would you like to go?" I said, "Sure." So I go there, and we meet at Panera the next day. And one of the guys walked up to me, and I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "The last occupied country in the world." I said, "You're from Palestine." And we went fishing, and they kind of spread out all over the different places on the shore. And I went to them one by one to kind of get to know them. After that experience, not my friend then, I never met him yet, but someone said there's a guy named Brett that works for Crescent Project. He lives here. And I said, I need to get a better handle on how to reach Muslims. So I meet him, we hit it off, and I decide I want to spend, my years in reaching Muslims. That's been about 11 years ago. So yeah,
Wow.
that's kind of my story.
Wow, wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. And again, a lot of my listeners kind of know my story as well. Of course, I'm
Mm-hmm.
originally Indian. I was born in a Christian
Mm-hmm.
household, but I was born and raised in Bahrain, and so just very familiar with the Islamic worldview as well.
Yes.
Speaking of the Islamic worldview, it is interesting in the American context. I think maybe what put Islam and Muslims on the front and center of American consciousness was probably 9/11. I think for the
Yeah.
most part
Yeah.
before that, I think I don't think Americans were really thinking that much, or even the West in
Yeah.
general were really
Yeah.
thinking that much about Islam or Muslim countries or Arab countries. But 9/11 definitely opened something up. And
Yeah.
obviously, a very horrific incident over there. But I think it's important. I think even though now we're like 20 years removed from 9/11, there is
Yeah.
still a lot of, what can I say, naivete, if you will. There's
Yeah.
still a lot of
Yeah.
misunderstanding, misconception about the Islamic worldview. And,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I think it would be a good place for us to start
Yeah.
talking about all of this by first addressing the Islamic worldview. And I actually want to kind of get your take on this. I want to read for you a quote by George W. Bush, and he actually gave this
Okay.
speech at a American policy conference a long time ago. And this is what he said. I'll try to make it quick here. He says, "Our commitment to democracy is also tested in the Middle East, which is my focus today and must be a focus of American policy for decades to come. In many nations of the Middle East, countries of great strategic importance, democracy has not yet taken root. And the questions arise, are the peoples of the Middle East somehow beyond the reach of liberty? Are millions
Yeah.
of men and women and children condemned by history or culture to live in despotism? Are they alone, never to know freedom and never even to have a choice in the matter? I, for
Mm-hmm.
one, do not believe it. I believe every person has the ability and the right to be free." He actually goes on to say later that freedom is ultimately what every human heart desires and wants. And it doesn't matter whether it's Islam, it doesn't matter if it's the Arab world, they all want the same thing as well. And as someone who grew up in the Middle Eastern milieu, I remember listening to that and thinking, I
Right.
don't think that's quite true.
Right.
So,
Right.
but
Right.
I
Right.
do think that that kind of gives you a glimpse of sort of the Western rosy
Yeah.
lensed
Yeah.
sort of view of not only ethnic differences, but cultural differences and religious differences as well. What do you
Yeah.
have to say to that? And we'll kind of jump board from that.
I want to just kind of unpack a little bit of that, and it's important to understand the growth of Islam first. A lot of Islam grew after 1965,
Mm.
and that prior to that, it was mostly African American Muslims there, and then the Hart-Celler Immigration Act changed the game. Okay, so a lot of the Muslim growth is fairly new,
Mm.
to be honest. So I think that's important. Probably the brunt of it came in the 1980s and so on. And so, what George Bush's sort of political philosophy was to kind of spread democracy around the world.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, in the Muslim worldview and the typical Western worldview, they're at odds in a lot
Correct.
of ways.
That's right.
In the Western worldview, it's really about freedom,
Mm.
freedom of choice, to be able to reason and arrive at your own conclusions. And so, the one thing that maybe describes the Western culture most is freedom. Okay, but a lot of the Middle East and the other Muslim countries, their paradigm is about submission.
Correct.
Submission to Allah's will. Okay,
Right.
and so, well, sort of the worldview there. Well, if you give people an opportunity to have freedom, they'll choose it. You know, and the way the leadership structure and so on is done, it's very tough. Now, in the Muslim world, there are varying degrees of this. You say Saudi Arabia, Iran is going to be different than let's
Like a
say
Bahrain or Dubai. Yeah.
Indonesia,
Hmm.
absolutely. But they still have Sharia in family law.
Right.
Okay, Sharia still speaks to that. There is a system. We think everybody is created in the image of God has essential dignity, and we think that's a universal characteristic, and it's really not.
Yeah.
That's a distinctly Christian and Jewish characteristic.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a different worldview. Now, I would say this. I think there are two defining moments. One of them was 9/11,
Hmm.
where there were a sort of a fear that came of Muslims and that kind of thing.
Correct.
Another event is October 7th.
Right.
And what I see, sort of, this is my boots on the ground analysis.
Mm.
We're seeing the more true, real Islam emerge.
Mm.
I go back to October 7th myself. I landed in London on
Mm.
October 7th, there to meet Shia Islamic leaders.
Mm.
I was scheduled actually to speak at the University of Tehran the following month in November.
Oh, wow.
And I was going to be at Qum and Tehran, both speaking. We had it lined up. And then October 7th happened. But what happened on October 7th was horrible. But the light really came on October 8th for me.
Mm.
And that's when I saw the protests. That's when I saw the unbridled hatred. And at that time, it came from two sources.
Mm.
Global Islam and global progressivism.
Mm.
And they're different, but they're on the same team. After that, I went on 21 different Uber rides. I like to go on the Ubers and, witness, talk to people, that kind of thing. 18 of the 21 Uber rides were very contentious.
Mm.
It was almost like God, to them, we're being vindicated,
Mm.
Against the West, because there's really a deep-seated animosity between the West in general, but the United States and
Israel.
and Israel.
Now, this is in London?
Yeah, this is in London.
Okay.
Yeah, but remember what happened there in the United States. there were the big protests at Columbia University and other universities. They were attacking Jewish students,
Yeah, and we'll get to
and
that.
yeah.
I
Oh
definitely want
yeah,
to get
yeah,
to that
yeah,
part of it. Yeah, no, that is very interesting, and I think one of the things that I did notice, even with the October 7th, is that even as the dust was settling
yeah,
in the kibbutz areas of Israel, protests has already started against Israel. Israel had not even
yeah, yeah,
responded, and
yeah,
anti-Israel protests had started all over the world. And we'll get to that, but I want to
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
get back into sort of the Western sort of analysis of Islamic worldview, and I think there seems to be again this
Hmm.
faux idea that yes, there are problems in that part of the world, but those problems can be fixed by democracy, by capitalism,
Yeah,
by
yeah.
liberty, and all the values that we cherish here in the Western world. And
Hmm.
there's this idea that these things can mix and match, that we can just take those value systems like a Lego piece and just attach it onto the Middle
Right,
Eastern
right.
world, and they'll be happy and good to go. And it's just a matter of time that they will become just like the United States. And I
Right,
think
right.
that perspective is just fundamentally flawed, and it actually
Yes,
demonstrates the great chasm of misunderstanding between the Judeo-Christian based Western worldview and the Islamic based sort of Middle Eastern worldview.
absolutely. I think because one thing, Islam is fairly new as an influential religion in America. It's slowly becoming maybe the second largest religion in the coming years in America, given right now it's still Judaism, but Judaism is shrinking, Islam is growing. I think that um, there's where the church, and this is the brunt of my work,
Yeah.
it is to inform people, inform pastors.
Mm.
I've done a lot of work also through academic work and interviewing pastors and that kind of thing, and talking with pastors just as a Crescent Project employee. And there is not a good understanding at all
Yeah,
of Islam. I
that's
think,
right.
yeah, yeah. So anecdotally, you're going to get one out of 1,000.
I think the other struggle in the West is our difficulty to understand why our live and let live creed doesn't carry over in other
Yeah,
parts of the world. Here we are very, we're very pragmatic. We're very,
yeah, yeah,
influenced by
yeah.
the Enlightenment and sort of relativism and secularism. And there's sort of this idea that, hey, each person to their own, you do what you want, I do what I want. As long as we don't bother each other, we can all be good and happy. But the live and let live creed, that ethos, is not a Muslim creed. Could you
Right,
unpack
right,
that a
right,
little bit
right.
more, please, for our
Yeah, yeah.
listeners?
There's something what one scholar calls dimitude,
Mm,
and this goes back to the Constitution of Medina. And what you would have is you would have non-Muslims. They can live there if they were Christians or Jews, but they had to pay a special tax,
the
and
jizya.
they
Hmm.
were yeah, the jizya, and they were inferior.
Right.
So what you have today is still the structural fabric of that
Correct.
in every Muslim culture.
Yeah.
So there's not the concept of freedom of religion. As a matter of fact, you're not allowed to criticize Islam, for
Right.
instance. In America, you have the freedom to critique any religion. So that is a lot of things we take for granted, a lot
Hmm.
of our worldview because we have been so distanced ourselves from our Christian roots, we really, progressives have plagiarized our worldview and sort of taking it, some of the principles and their assumptions, but they have no grounding, like the worth of every human being. Like that's a universal principle. And it's not a universal principle. In the 1970s in the United States, what happened was in the universities, there became just this unbridled critique of the West and colonialism and everything. And it wasn't a rational, objective critique. It was a Marxist motivation,
Right.
and the idea was to bring about social change.
Yes.
And the problem was the West. And so a lot of young people today really don't really have a grasp on what makes the West great. In their mind, the West is bad.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I think kind of what you said, even sort of the anti-American sentiment, anti-colonialistic sentiment goes back it goes back a long ways, but it really kind of bloomed, I think, probably 60s, 70s, 80s, where a lot of these, these kind of revolutionary characters ended up becoming professors at liberal universities.
Right.
And so academia got contaminated right there. The Noam Chomskys of the world and the Bill Ayers of the world and all these ideas started infiltrating academia. And now we have raised a whole generation of Marxists, little Marxists.
I would add to that, there's a key scholar. His name was Edward Said.
Yes.
He was a post-colonial scholar.
Correct.
And he is really defined Islamic studies in America and a lot of how Islam is understood.
Right.
And he wrote a book called Orientalism. And basically what it did was it safeguarded Islam from any critique.
Right.
And it allowed, in some respects, an apologetic for Muslim scholars. So yeah, that's another issue.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the Israel-Hamas conflict, because I think that's where that's kind of the touch point for a lot of the things that we're talking about.
Could I just go through some points,
please,
for our listeners to understand the Islamic worldview?
Please.
First of all, it starts with the oneness of God. The Ta'id. That is, he's one in authority, and he rules in every domain of life. And within the Sharia law concept is that really orders every single domain of life. And so that's sort of the Islamic understanding. That represents divine law. So Sharia isn't just law, it's the architecture of obedience.
Right.
It translates the oneness of God into the ordering of society. And as you were talking about the West and the culture and those kind of things, the Islamic worldview factors in. You have the epistemology.
Yes.
The idea that what's right and wrong and truth and so on, it starts with revelation, but you're not able to critique revelation with reason.
Right.
Reason is useful, and that's fine. And you see, the Western concept is very different.
Yes.
We can critique human reason.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
The nature of humanity is different. It has a different anthropology. Muslims believe that everybody is born a Muslim. And so if they deviate from that, people are weak in the morality and so on. They deviate from that. And if a Muslim or someone gets saved, or someone converts to Islam, they don't call the convert, they call the revert.
Right.
And so this idea then, there's not a need for redemption. We believe men and women are fallen in their nature, and they need a savior. They believe man is basically good, and what is needed is guidance. And so it's also, I think, there needs to be an understanding of the difference. We would really honor the idea of separation of church and state in the West. That is not an Islamic worldview.
Correct.
It's religion and state.
Right.
Muhammad was both a religious leader and a political leader.
That's correct.
And these things are tied. So I just wanted to kind of bring that out there.
I'm glad you did. That's a very important distinction to make. I especially like what you said about sort of the distinction between revelation and reason. I think there is a sort of epistemological superiority there. Where reason is almost seen as inferior to revelation. It's almost like Gnosticism.
Yeah.
But you see a little bit of that even in Christianity, where in some Christian circles, like some charismatic circles and places like that, there's almost this. They may not actually come out and say it, but there's almost this sort of mood as if any sort of revelation that comes directly from God supersedes Scripture almost, and so I understand that sort of pathology. But no, I thank you for bringing that. I want to, and keeping that for all of our listeners, it's important to keep all of that at the back of your mind as we sort of segue into the Israel-Hamas thing. Obviously, October 7th was a horrific thing, and it was probably the worst persecution of the Jews since the Holocaust, I think, that happened. And but one of the things that immediately stood out to me was the coverage, the way it was covered on mainstream media. And the coverage was very thickly laced with an oppressor-oppressed narrative. And there was definitely a very, there was sort of this sympathetic disposition, if you will, toward the violence and the brutality. And, and there was this sort of lip service to, what Hamas did was bad. Yeah, it was terrible. But you have to understand this is decades and decades of pent up, rage and suppression and just all these things. And so we have to understand that this kind of rage can spill out in sort of this sort of violence. And so while there was a lot of sympathy for, for the casualties of of war there in Gaza once Israel responded, it was very hard to see a similar type of sympathy going the other way toward Jewish children who were beheaded or put in ovens, or Jewish women who were raped and brutally murdered and things like that. So there was definitely a double standard in the way that conflict was covered. Would you say not?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head with the worldview. The typical journalist, they tend to lean progressive, and so they have a paradigm of an oppressed and oppressor. And through sort of, I think it started in the academy, but what you have is a view of white settler colonizers and so on, and that is fundamentally ahistorical. There's nothing empirically verifiable about that worldview at all. I mean, it's a illiterate of history. So, yeah, I think you have that. You have also the online world that really, particularly in the Muslim community. In the Muslim community, there was I can't remember the guy's name. He's a CNN commentator, and he says this, and he really boils it down, and I think he's correct. He says the typical Muslim looks at his phone and he says, "Dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, Diddy, dead Gaza baby." So there are, even before October 7th. There's that constant barrage of images. And so when you have, and that really sets you up for propaganda.
Yes.
And so you have a Muslim faction that's very energized because of that. And that is sort of the global uniter of the Ummah.
Yes.
Is Palestine.
Yes.
And now, on the other side with the journalists, they want to produce a utopian society. They believe the problem is the West, and now they have a scapegoat in Israel, and now they can do justice. Now, in that framework, what you have is if you're in the oppressor, you can do nothing right.
Right.
If you're the oppressed, you can do nothing wrong.
Right.
And what you need to do is, and here's sort of the worldview there. And I just read some stuff from Mamdani's dad, and this will give you an example of this that comes in the academy. He talked about suicide bombers, and so we need to rethink how we look at them.
Yes, I remember reading this.
And so that worldview says they're a product of their environment. Remember that we believe as Christians that men and women are fallen in their nature.
Correct.
We're born rebellious before God. But in the Islamic worldview and in the progressive worldview, there's a lot of similarity. They're not the same, but there are a lot of similarities. Well, man is basically good, and if he's not doing that, it must be the problem that he's a victim of society. So with Islam, in their worldview is embedded a victim. They're the victim, and so that really plays to the progressive narrative. So
yes. No, and I think all of those things are exactly right. And one of the things that I found very fascinating about this whole conflict was that not only was there like an actual military war going on, but there was a huge propaganda war that was even bigger. And we were, swallowing it hook, line, and sinker here in the West. And I think I want to keep, as we keep talking about these kind of current events, I want to keep drawing our listeners back to occasional touch points of Islamic theology, Islamic worldview, because I think all those kind of things feed in. So, for example, I remember talking to a few people about this, and and they were just citing me statistics that was coming directly from Hamas, that was coming directly from Gaza. And within, there was a bomb that fell there, and within minutes, the health ministry of Gaza came out with this report that 500 people have died. And I remember thinking, wow, that was pretty quick. That was a very quick body count that was accomplished in minutes. But the BBC ran with it, the CNN ran with it, MSNBC ran with it. And there was just this idea that we absolutely can take their word at it. But if one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand about Islamic theology is there is something called the doctrine of taqiyya. And the doctrine of taqiyya is just this idea that deception is very allowable. It is within the framework of the Islamic worldview, insofar as it accomplishes the advancement of Islam, or the advancement of the cause of the ummah or the people. It is okay, even mandated by Allah, to deceive so that the cause of Islam would move forward. Could you speak to that a little bit, and how that plays into the Western mindset?
I think what we're seeing right now, prior to October 7th, you've seen a lot more taqiyya. But now what we're seeing is the real Islam. There's an emboldening, a confidence there.
Yes.
That is happening. In their worldview, this proves Islam is true. It confirms that. There's a eschatology that's driving this.
Yes.
And so, I think there's less taqiyya now than there was prior to October 7th. This is my experience.
Yeah.
And I think the theology that's driving this is that's embedded here, that eventually Islam will spread and take over the world. and there's a confidence there. And think about this: if you're a Muslim in America and you have a Muslim mayor in the largest, most influential city in America, what does that tell you? That tells you that my worldview is correct.
Mm.
That we're that this is happening. For your listeners, let me draw a parallel. Imagine we get the news online or however we get the news that there was a mayor elected in Saudi Arabia that was Christian.
Mm.
Our immediate reaction: look, God's moving there. Look, there's a revival taking place.
We would
And
completely interpret it through a Christian theological
the,
worldview. Yes. Mhm.
exactly. And the similar thing is with Muslims. And so I think that's what's going on, driving it theologically.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And one of the things I also find humorous about sort of the way the media coverage has been here, especially when covering the atrocities of Hamas and things like that, is a lot of the leaders of Hamas, like the late Hassan Nasrallah and Qasem Soleimani and all these guys, and even Yahya Sinwar and all these guys who no longer exist. All these guys would come out and openly say, "We want to wipe Israel off the face of this earth." They literally openly call America the great Satan and Israel the little Satan, and it is in Hamas's charter. It is in
Right.
Hamas's founding document. It is in their creed, the destruction of the Jewish people. And yet, the Western media's absolute refusal to believe that
Right.
was something that I found flabbergasting.
Yeah.
It's like the murderer, the guy who commits the crime comes and says, "No, I want this person to die," and his advocate saying, "No, you don't want him," and he's like, "No, I actually do. I really would like to wipe him
Mm-hmm.
off the face of this earth," and the advocate's like, "No, no, you actually don't," and we're attributing all sorts of defenses to that person. That's what it
Yeah.
looks like, and I think it's
Right.
very
Right.
mistaken and deceived.
Yeah. I think the postmodern worldview is part of this as well. There's no truth is not objective. What you want is have a narrative to produce social change,
Yes.
and no one's really accountable for the reactions. Now think about this: in the Christian tradition, we think the fundamental problem is the sinfulness in the human heart.
Correct.
That's the fundamental problem. In the secular progressive worldview, you replace it. It's not the human heart, but it's systems.
Right.
So you're trying to redeem systems. You're deconstructing systems.
Right.
And that's how redemption is a secular redemption is
It's a
achieved.
liberation from structures and
Right.
systems. Yeah. Hmm.
Exactly. But in doing so, they do so much damage because they don't have an objective worldview
Yes.
that is undergirded by truth.
Correct.
And I think that's the remedy: is the proclamation of truth.
Yes.
That illuminates error.
Yes.
And whether it be anti-Semitism or the woke culture or the alt-right or whatever, it is to truth will be successful eventually. I mean, ultimately, things are not going to get better until Jesus comes back.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So I think we need to also keep that in mind, that there are no utopian societies.
Right. And going back to the propaganda war, I remember I was actually having this conversation with someone from work, and
Mm.
and she was talking about all the innocent children who died and the innocent people who died because of Israel's retaliatory actions and so forth. And I was trying to explain, you realize that Hamas is actually firing from underneath schools, firing from
Right,
hospitals and
right,
things like
right.
that, because they want Israeli counterattack coming back to that so that they can propagandize this incident, and show
Mm-hmm.
all the,
Mm-hmm.
make the optics look bad and show, look at all the people that the
Right.
Israelis are killing. And it was interesting because she could not fathom that. She was like, why would they do that? Why would they purposely harm their people? And I think this goes back to the great chasm in worldviews that Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He said, I came to give you life. I came to give you life abundantly. And we assume, I think wrongly, that other cultures, and more specifically, that the Islamic culture also values life to the same extent that we do. And that is simply fundamentally not true. And
Right,
I was doing some research because I was actually thinking about this. Where does this idea come from? Is it a modern construct? And turns out it actually goes all the way back to, very like uh, ancient times. There's this gentleman, I say gentleman, he was a Muslim military commander by the name of Khalid ibn al-Walid. And in 633 AD, according to historical accounts, al-Walid sent a letter to the Persian Emperor Yazdegerd III, who was the last king of the Sassanid dynasty. And in the letter included a declaration: submit or you will be conquered by men who love death as you love life.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
remember reading that and thinking, that is exactly what I heard. What is it? Yahya Sinwar, I think, said that
Right,
before
right.
he passed away, where he said, we love death as much as the infidels love life. And
Right,
this
right.
idea goes back, it's a theological idea. It goes all the way back to, just like how you made the distinction between revelation and reason, there's a big distinction between death and life. And they almost see death
Yeah.
as a martyrdom, as this great thing that is supposed to be accomplished, and life actually as a sort of weakness.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think the martyrdom worldview is even more so on the Shia side than the Sunni side. Because you have a whole narrative of Karbala. You have the second, third imams. They're killed, and martyrdom is very much a part of the ritual that they engage in every month. I mean, every year rather. It's also very much a part of the Islamicist worldview, and that goes back to Qutb and others that really engage in the idea of martyrdom. And when he makes that statement, it really illuminates the worldviews.
Yes.
And we're creating an image of God that has essential dignity. If you look at the IDF and how they handled the war, they were meticulous on trying to do their best to get humanitarian aid and so on, and in order to not do that,
Yes.
Hamas had tunnels underneath hospitals, and they knew that they would have to bomb them, and that people were just mere props in the propaganda war.
Yes.
But I think we focus on Hamas and we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yes.
Because Iran is the evil empire in all of this.
Yes.
And they fund Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and there are 5 different organizations, and Soleimani was instrumental in putting that all together. That's of course who Trump had taken out.
That's right.
During his first term.
Correct.
But Islam does not love life,
right,
like we do.
Yes.
And I think that worldview, if there's anything that I try to do in my work, you do in your work, is to bring it back to the worldview and to know what both of them believe. It was Os Guinness that said, contrast is the mother of clarity.
Yes.
And I think we need to continue to do that, because Muslims, who talked about taqiyya, oh yeah, we believe that too. and a lot of people aren't very informed. And so I think we have to articulate it in a, in a kind way, but a forthright way and a bold way.
Yes. Yes. No, I think that's exactly right. And which actually brings us to, I know we talked about the conflict, but I want to focus on the sort of animosity towards Israel, which brings us to kind of the
Yeah,
topic of anti-Semitism. And I want to kind of get into
yeah.
the pathology of anti-Semitism. And I want to start off by actually quoting someone. This is his name is Dr. Tim Orr, and he has some very good things to say about anti-Semitism. And I'd like you to comment on your own commentary, if you will. And
Sure, sure.
so I'm quoting this from one of your writings that you posted on Facebook, and you say, quote, "Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest and most persistent hatred. No other form of prejudice has crossed as many civilizations, reshaped itself across so many centuries, or survived so many moral revolutions. What began as a religious accusation later became racial ideology, then political doctrine, and today disguises itself in the language of human rights. Each era
Mhm.
reinvents the justification, yet the hostility remains. Historians can trace its evolution and sociologists can map its patterns, but the deeper question, why this hatred endures with such supernatural resilience, cannot be answered by material analysis alone. Anti Semitism is not just a social disease, it is a spiritual rebellion. To face it truthfully, one must look beyond psychology and politics to the moral and metaphysical drama that has shaped it since antiquity. Legal scholar Alan Dershowitz has described anti Semitism as a kind of moral pathology driven by envy and projection. Envy might explain resentment towards Jewish success, but the hatred often intensifies precisely when Jews prosper. This suggests that the target is not material success, but what Jewish identity represents: divine election and moral order. From a theistic perspective, anti Semitism endures because humanity is uneasy with transcendence. The Jewish people remind the world that moral law does not originate from human will, and that reminder becomes intolerable to those who would be their own gods. End quote. So, Dr. Tim Orr, please comment on the quote by Dr. Tim Orr.
Yeah, I think it is the longest history, and I think we have a unique answer to this problem. A lot of them are completely naturalistic answers, but I don't think it doesn't explain the Holocaust.
Mm.
It doesn't explain how this anti-Semitism over a myriad of different cultures over time, and what it will do, it will adjust according to. It's like a host, and it adjusts according to the environment.
Parasitic, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely parasitic,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it is. One author called it the longest hatred.
Mm.
And now we're really seeing it in America. The reason why uh, um, people wanted to go back to Israel and to form it as a nation was because they could not, they weren't safe anywhere else. They weren't safe in the Arab countries. A lot of people said, well, there were 750 million people, Arabs displaced. But what they don't say, there were equal amount, if not more, in the Jews in Arab lands that were displaced. And there are a lot of Arabs that live in Israel today. But yet you have sort of the colonial colonizers and that kind of rhetoric. But I think one of what God had chose them as His covenant people to bring about redemption. And the way in which God can't, the devil can't thwart God's plan per se, but he will attack his chosen people. And I think that you look at some of our greatest Christian thinkers, Luther and Augustine, had kind of anti-Semitic ideas.
Mm.
And so you even see it in the, of course, Christian Europe. It was prominent there. It's prominent in the Middle East and Islam and so on. And so it is definitely the longest hatred.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand that there's a spiritual component to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There is.
Yeah.
And because it is, I've obviously I recognize anti-Semitism has been around a long time, but I felt like after October 7th, it seemed like it became more blatant in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that I remember seeing videos of people going around in all these cities, Baltimore or Atlanta, New York, and all these places, people going around and ripping off pictures of children,
Yes.
Jewish children who had been abducted, and
Yeah.
almost like there was one video of where this woman walks past the picture of a lost dog and went over and ripped off the
Mm-hmm.
picture of a Jewish child who had been
Yeah.
abducted.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember thinking, okay, I know that there were Muslims who have always sort of tolerated this whole Jewish thing for a long time, but because of how much the Overton window has moved now, and the way the left has really created some permission structures here in the West, I think there's a lot of sort of boldness when it comes to the display of
Mm-hmm.
anti-Semitic behavior that has
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
enabled, I think, by leftist permission structures here, and that is quite scary, actually.
Yeah. And it's now, as we see, it's not just in the left.
Yeah, that's
It it
exactly right.
it, it it's on the right. I think woke ideology paved the way to that. If anti-Semitism can be celebrated and furthered in our universities, you have people part of the alt-right, white nationalists. Hey, we're doing it too. There's a difference there between the two. I think among progressives, it tends to be the elites.
Yes.
And that's not the case with the right wing anti Semitism. It's the disenfranchised males.
That's right.
And they're angry, and a lot of the progressive and feminist ideas of manliness have been there, and they're angry. And whenever you're angry and you're failure, you want a scapegoat.
Right.
And so the Jews become that scapegoat.
Yeah, but I also think it's been very disheartening to see right wing extremism, at least from like very, very prominent personalities, and I'm okay with
Yeah,
naming
yeah,
them, like Candace Owens and the
yeah.
Tucker Carlsons of the
Tucker
world, and
Carlson,
Nick
yeah,
Fuentes
yeah,
of the world, and all these
yeah, yeah,
people who have massive platforms and have just constantly, bashed the Jewish people,
yeah,
and there
yeah,
is no pushback, and the democratization of the internet, I think, has
yeah,
really
yeah.
removed all the gatekeepers that used to exist in the pre-internet era, where people like these
Hmm.
would not have even had a voice to be able to say these kind of things.
Right,
And I
right.
think, there's good and bad with the internet. I think there are a lot of good voices that are out there that we are able to hear, but this has also allowed for these sort of very extremist ideas and permission structures that have been created, where even people on the right, supposed right, are now saying very anti-Semitic things.
Yeah, that on the right they tend to link it to it's an America first, America only, and they blame some of the our wars that we've gotten into
Yeah.
on Israel, and they're controlling our foreign policy, and it's just rubbish.
Yes.
But when all errors are amplified, and it's so convincing,
Mm.
one thing that changed the game is this right here.
Yes.
In when information was just on a desktop, The only time we could look at it is when we were at home in front of our computer.
Yes.
And today we're hooked on it 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And it's designed for addiction. And it's designed to give alerts. So we'll go back to the phone, back to the phone, back to the phone. And it's becoming our digital Babylon.
Yes.
As one author has said. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. And so it is definitely a growing problem on the right as well. I want to kind of go back into sort of we've been talking about Islam and Hamas and Palestine and Israel and all that. And while these are nations and entities and organizations, I think we live in a time now where they've also become symbols. They've become metaphors for bigger things. And nowhere has this become more evident than seeing college campuses, college kids on college campuses wearing the keffiyehs and waving those Palestinian flags. And I remember telling my wife, if I were to pull any one of those kids and ask them to point out Palestine on the map, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be able to do it. And here they are marching,
exactly.
Chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And there is actually one clip. It was actually kind of funny. The guy walked up to a lady who was chanting that and said, what's the name of the river and what's the name of the sea? And she had no idea. But she had it on a big, sign, and she was chanting in solidarity. And so tell our listeners what exactly the symbolism of Palestine has become, and what you and I have called Palestinianism even, and what it represents and why that's dangerous.
I think different groups have different, it's an ideological placeholder. And for the Islamicists, it represents jihad. For the Marxists, it's class struggle and anti-capitalism. For the post-colonialists, it's anti-Western resistance. For the progressive activists, it's a moral theater. It's a cause that signals virtue without personal cost. So I think the Palestinianism is a way, but I think the people who engage in this have different motivations, but they're all united in hatred of Israel and the furtherance of Palestine. And so you have the boycott, divest, and sanction movement that wants to. It's the only nation that, and I think it's important to go back to the idea of Palestine. This is really a created thing.
Correct.
And it was created because to be a sort of an antagonist towards Israel, a way to vilify Israel. That was the point and reason why it was created.
Correct.
And so a lot of people don't know the history behind it. They don't know Arafat, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and so on. But they don't care.
Right.
That's the thing. They don't care.
Yes.
They're fighting for justice. They're really, when you take this sort of Islamicist worldview or Marxist worldview, it's really fueled by resentment.
Yes.
And the Palestinianism is basically a resentment. What happens if Israel is no longer? They're going to find another.
Yes.
They'll go after America then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting when in the, maybe this is not the right way to say it, but in the heydays of ISIS, when all kinds of terrible atrocities were being committed, I remember there was a large faction of people, even here in the West, who looked at that and who were justifiably horrified by that, but
Mm-hmm.
immediately defended it, saying, "This is not true Islam. What we're seeing
Yeah.
ISIS do is an aberration of Islam." The fact of the matter is that what people don't understand is a lot of modern Islam, as we see it in many different parts of the world, where there are lots of peaceful Muslims who who
Right.
who
Right.
are just
Right.
going about their lives, who just want to go to mosque and excuse me, and who just want to
Mm-hmm.
live their lives and not engage in any sort of jihad or revolution or anything like that. The
Mm-hmm.
reality of the matter is that orthopraxy is an aberration of Islam. And
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
reality is that the way ISIS practiced a lot of their, their punishments and, jurisprudence and things like that actually most closely resembled fifth and sixth century Islam. That's it. That they were the
Yeah. Yeah.
closest, comparison to that. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of people don't believe that. First of all, they don't
Right.
know it,
Right.
and even if you told them, they would not believe it. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
the reality is that I think you're exactly right. We're seeing a lot of sort of the ancient medieval, not medieval, but kind of the sixth century version of Islam is really starting to poke its face out, and that is quite a scary thing.
I would say I think it's important to understand this that Islam and its quest for dominance will change depending on where it's at.
Mm,
Um, there are, let's say, in other African countries, maybe it's Sharia now, and they're going to do jihad, and they're going to do that. And the strategy in America is very different.
correct.
And it's the long game.
Yes.
The Muslim Brotherhood is alive and well right here in the United States.
Yes.
It's a very organized but loosely organized thing. And what they do is they define Islam to the intellectual, to media, and so on. A lot of people who are getting leadership positions here are very astute. They only get the best. And so this is one of the reasons why I think Trump is making a big mistake with Qatar and I mean, they were the one who were funding the anti-Semitism in the universities, and all of a sudden, they played along in the Muslim mind. It's not about right now, but it's about their great grandchildren
Yes.
and their great grandchildren.
Yes.
That's sort of the worldview, and we'll make concessions now, but our goal is this.
Yeah.
And you better believe that that is the goal right now of Mandami,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the goal of a lot of people in New York. And what they'll do is jihad for them is elections
Yes.
and getting into political positions.
Yes.
That is jihad for them.
Yes.
And they will focus on larger cities. And now they're starting to focus on suburbs as well.
I want to get to the influence of Islam in the West, but before we go there, though, I still feel like I want to unpack a little bit more of this strange marriage of Islamism and critical theory that we're seeing right
Yeah.
now, and I think it's very influential in how it has created the right sort of climate of sympathy for even a terrorist group like Hamas. And I think
Right.
I think we've been fully indoctrinated, and like we talked about, these kids on college campuses wearing keffiyehs and waving the Palestinian flag and marching side by side with LGBTQ activists, which I think is one of the strangest coalitions because their end goals could not be more different. And yet they have become strange bedfellows in this war against a common enemy. And I do think it is very interesting to see how critical theory is sort of the veneer around this
Mm-hmm.
Palestinian cause, where Israel is seen as the great oppressor that is sort of white in that colonialistic sense of the world, or the colonialist outpost in the Middle East, if you will, but also Palestine is seen as the oppressed.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, speak to that a little bit more, because I think a lot of people in the West, especially like conservatives, the people like us who are very confused by why on earth are we, why is this? There should be more moral clarity here, but why is there so much confusion? I think this is why, but I'd like to hear your opinion on it as well.
Yeah, I think critical theory is undergirded by the politics of resentment. And that it doesn't hold individuals accountable.
Yeah.
It holds society, and because it goes back to systems, and you gotta deconstruct the system. And if you think the West is the reason for the problems and that must be dismantled,
Mm.
well, you're gonna look for political partners.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot there, and that's the marriage. I think there were relationships that were developed in the 70s and the 80s. It didn't just emerge right away. I think that's important, but it happened in the elite class.
Yes.
There's where it took place, and it happened at Harvard and Yale
Yes.
and Columbia, and sort of that in turn. So you have that piece,
Yes.
but you have an economic piece
Mm.
because Qatar has floated millions,
Yes.
millions, multi-million, maybe a couple billion
Yeah.
dollars.
Qatar is
So
like
you
the
make
Qatar is like the George Soros of the Middle East.
Yes, it is. It is. And you're gonna pay off
Yeah.
politicians. You're gonna grease the wheels of a lot of different people, and when you do that, you get favors.
Yes.
Let me give you one example here. There is an organization, a great organization. I really appreciate them a lot. It's called ISCAP. It's a counter group that addresses anti-Semitism,
Hmm.
and they were housed at Yale University.
Yeah.
But Cutter established, I think, a chair there,
Yeah.
and they had to move out.
Mm.
And so you really, where the money goes
Follow the money. Yes. Hmm.
is important. That's another one. There are other reasons.
Yes.
You have the NGOs
Yes.
are a big part of this as well. And I know Trump is really got down on them, and the typical reaction, oh, you're taking away, this and that. But yeah, so there are several reasons I think that we see that. But online, TikTok is another reason as well. You can package something
Hmm.
and make it look attractive,
Yes.
and it can be completely evil.
Yes.
But if you're watching that, and you don't have a grounding.
Yeah.
You're very well may be impacted by that.
Yeah. No, I think that's right, Tim. And I also think that, in many ways, when I kind of think, I have a son, he's 14 years old, he's going to be headed to college in a few years. And it makes me think of what the college environment, obviously, right now we're looking to send him to a Christian university where I actually currently work right now. But I think of these college kids and how much of money they're spending to go to these universities. And instead of
Mm-hmm.
studying, they're protesting and doing all these things. And it tells me in many ways that, academia has failed them. This is a failure
Yeah,
of
yeah.
education in many ways. And these young people have lost the ability to think critically, to be nuanced
Mhm.
in their
Mhm.
thinking. And as the French philosopher Voltaire once said, surely whoever can get them to believe absurdities can get them to commit atrocities. And so
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of these college kids do, is they're swallowing hook, line, and sinker all sorts of false ideas and false narratives.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
but I also think there's a loss of what we would call teleology, the loss of telos, right? The loss of teleology in
Yeah.
their lives.
Yeah.
There's no meaning, there's no purpose, and so they have to wrap their identity around something that gives them purpose. And
Right.
uh,
Right.
and I'm concerned about this sort of strange fascination with revolutionary thought or revolutionary ideas. This generation, Gen
Yeah.
Z, seems
Yeah.
very fascinated by revolution. And don't get me wrong, I think there is a sort of positive revolution, but it seems that it's misplaced in the sense that every structure, and here comes CRT again, critical theory, any structure by definition is seen as oppressive. Any sort of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
deserves to be torn down. And so if something can be identified as a structure, then their default position toward that is,
Yeah.
well, it
Yeah.
needs to come down. And that's a
Right.
dangerous
Right.
philosophy for young people to believe.
Because there's not a lot of thought behind it.
No, no.
It's emotive. It's emotionally driven.
Yes.
And today we think with our emotions.
Yes.
So that's a problem.
Yeah. So let's as we kind of sort of come toward the end here, I want to talk about the growth of Islam, the expansion of Islam. And again, like you very rightly said, Islam is a geopolitical religion. Conquest is a major creed in that worldview, and so expansion is in their DNA, if you will,
Yeah. Yeah.
politically,
Yeah.
geopolitically. And so as we see, you and I were talking about this yesterday on the phone, of how the UK is almost kind of become like a lost cause, unless they make some
Yeah.
drastic
Yeah.
steps right now.
Mhm.
They're in deep trouble in many parts of the UK over there. And
Yeah.
some of this is, by immigration, just mass immigration. And a
Mhm.
lot of these cultures, a lot of these Muslim cultures are setting up their own sorts of communes in a lot of these places that they move into, like Dearborn, Michigan, right here in the US, is an example of this. There is a refusal to assimilate to American culture. And,
Right.
they,
Right.
they kind of form their own little subcircles over there. And, America has always been a place for immigrants to come. I myself am an immigrant.
Right.
I'm a
Right.
US citizen
Right.
now. And so we're not anti-immigration in that sense. But again, I think immigration policy should be predicated on a correct worldview. I know by now our listeners are probably tired of hearing the word worldview hundreds of times by now, but I
Yeah.
cannot emphasize how important it is for us to understand that there is a worldview, there is an ideology behind politics, behind policies, behind all
Yeah.
these things that we're talking about. And the fact of the matter is that while all people are made in the image of God, not all cultures are equal. And not all cultures
Right.
are
Right.
equal because not all value systems are equal. Some value
Right.
systems
Right.
are simply better than other value systems. And this is
Yeah.
one of the problems we're starting to see. So even like Zoran Mamdani, the mayor of New
Mhm.
York now,
Mhm.
and just kind of what he represents there in New York. And you're starting to see representation on state level governments and school boards and community
Right.
organizations.
Right. Right.
We have,
Right.
like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and all these women in Congress now. There is a growing influence of Islam. And what do you think is the number one sort of the political answer to that? If you had the year of the administration, what is something that you would advise them? And then on a more personal level, what is sort of the socio-cultural way that we should go about thinking about these things?
I think educating them on the objective of Islam. Some of the things I call them the jihad twins,
Mm,
Omar and Talib, and I don't try to be it simply pejorative,
yeah,
but that's exactly what she's doing.
yeah,
And I think educating even the Trump administration and Trump, what Trump says, you can build a deal. Everybody's looking for their own self-interest, and once you get them together, and they see they're going to benefit, we're going to benefit, and that is not their worldview at all.
Right.
Behind the scenes, I went to an Islamic college. I got a master's degree. I got a little bit of insight on what goes behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And they're laughing at him behind closed doors, to be quite honest with you. I mean, they'll pay homage, they'll stroke his ego, and they'll do that, but they have a plan.
Yes.
And that plan is to eventually influence and take over America in 100, 200, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think educating politicians on Islam and understanding that there are completely different worldviews.
Yes.
And that, let's take Israel for an example. A lot of people want to differentiate between progressive minded Muslims and traditional Muslims, Islamicists. But I tell you what, there's one thing they all agree on, and that is opposition to Israel.
Yep.
They all agree on. There is a worldview that connects with all factors.
Yes.
And so the worldview issue is important.
Yeah, I had a friend ask me recently about the Abraham Accords and about how, they were like, Prashanth, what do you think? Are you excited about the Abraham Accords and all that? And, and I was telling him, I'm going to hold my judgment on that for now. I think it's good theater. I think they're saying all the right things. It's easy to be encouraged by the idea of all these Arab countries being in solidarity with Israel. But I can tell you one thing, thousands and thousands of years of animosity is not going to magically disappear by one little treaty that we sign on one particular day. And so I am not all that enthused about the Abraham Accords. If it happens, that's wonderful. I am very skeptical about that, only because I understand the worldview.
And I would say the idea of Abraham is a false unifier. And that was done by a Catholic priest in Lebanon, and to unite the three different religions. But when you look at what each religion teaches, they're very different about Abraham.
Correct.
So it's not really a uniter. It is sort of a concept that's supposed to unite, but when you dig a little deeper, to a Muslim, Abraham was a Muslim.
Yes.
To the Christian, Abraham serves a completely different role.
Correct.
So it's not a unifier.
Yeah. I also think that, I just want to, as we kind of wrap things up here, I want to be mindful of a lot of our listeners, and I have some progressive friends out there who are listening to this, and I want them to hear me loud and clear that this podcast, I don't want them to listen to this and think, man, there's just so much hate going on over here, where these guys are just hating on the Muslims. And I want to briefly speak to that. I do think there is some misunderstanding there. First of all, I have a lot of Arab friends. I have a lot of Muslim friends. I love them. I absolutely love them. In fact, the reason I am in this ministry and doing what I'm doing is because of conversations I've had with them a long time ago. And so, but I also want you to know that there are many of my Muslim friends who are not who don't care about jihad, who don't care about war, who don't care about global conquest and things like that. But, it makes me think of that one very viral clip that happened many years ago between, I think it was Ben Affleck and Sam Harris on Bill Maher's show.
Bill Maher.
And, Ben Affleck got very angry and upset And I remember thinking, he's just oblivious to the Islamic worldview.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think
yeah.
even though I ideologically disagree with Sam Harris was actually right about the fact that there are concentric circles when it comes to Muslims. There are,
Right,
in the
right.
core, there are like the jihadis, the guys who actually have their fingers on the triggers. And then around them, you have sort of the Islamists who may not actively participate in a lot of these sort of struggles, but who are very sympathetic toward it. There are
Right,
many
right, right.
Muslims out there who themselves will not participate in violent acts or things like that, but they are very sympathetic to Hamas. And then, of course, on the outer fringe, there are just Muslims who don't care about any of those things and who just want to assimilate and just live quiet lives. So I think there's a spectrum here, and I think it's important for people to understand that we are talking. Obviously, we have to talk about different levels within the Islamic
Mm-hmm.
community, but we are trying to get to the DNA, to the strain, to the
Right,
genetic
right.
core of Islamic theology that does have many problematic
Yeah.
aspects to it. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think what I like to do is differentiate between Muslims and Islam.
Mm, yes.
And you want to treat them like individuals.
Yes.
You want to love them,
Yes.
proclaim Christ, and be friends with them, and so on, because they're people whom God loves,
Yes.
and we should have compassion on them.
Yes.
But there's nothing wrong with critiquing an ideology.
Correct.
And that's exactly what we do. We critique
Yes.
an ideology because it's an ideology that needs to be critiqued.
Correct.
Now I will say this, and I've written for different people in Australia and other places about the Islamophobia concept, and that's what I would call a Western blasphemy law.
Mm.
In Islamic countries, you can't critique Islam,
Yeah.
but in the West, you can. Well, this is a way to not critique Islam. So what we want to do is we want to be loving but truthful.
Yes.
And expose lies when they're there, but also build relationships. And I think the practical thing there, because there's different components about Muslim ministry.
Mm-hmm.
There's an evangelistic mandate to love them and proclaim Christ. There's an apologetic mandate, truth and clarity, and that includes polemics.
Yeah.
There's also a cultural sensitivity there, understanding the Muslim heart, the worldview, what drives them. Then there's also discipleship, that there's a cost to conversion.
Yes.
And a big cost.
Yes.
And you and I know people personally who paid that cost.
Yes.
So we should be loving and patient with them.
Yes.
And there's some Muslim friends we're going to have that are never convert.
Yes.
But we're still called to love them.
Yes.
And I think this is where because I have to, and you do too, we're in it's multiple pieces to this.
Yes.
We're called to critique Islam and love Muslims.
Yes.
And what I found helpful is I have to go back to the gospel myself.
Yes.
And preach it to myself. Mm-hmm. And let the gospel change my heart. I see the need for it. I see my own sinfulness. I see the love that Christ has done. And that eradicates four things that prevent us from that. Human pride, fear. So there are four idols in the human heart that the gospel does. So we don't want to be angry at our Muslim friends. Here's what I see oftentimes in the Christian community. They'll get YouTube polemicists and find someone to practice on. That's not a good motivation.
No.
We want to connect, we want to love them, but we want to speak truth to them. And there's a real a relational component that can't be lost.
That's right. That's right. And I like what you said about that. And I know one of my buddies, Alan Schleman, also says the same thing. He said it's always good to make a distinction between Islam and Muslims. We have to, and that's what we are here to do. We want to critique Islam, the idea, but we want to love Muslims, the people who believe those ideas. And that distinction is very, very important to make. Tim, as we wrap up here, it's easy for a lot of Christians or Christian listeners who are listening to this to be unsure or have some level of anxiety or be afraid about things like this. And one of the things, anytime I speak about this issue, I always want to remind people we do not have to be afraid of this. This is the world we live in, and their ideas have consequences. We have to engage with bad ideas or difficult ideas or evil ideas. But the people who have believed those ideas are deceived. And so I think it is important that out of love for them, out of the care of the Christian gospel for them, we want to speak the truth in love. So as we wrap up here, what are some words of encouragement that you would give to our Christian brothers and sisters and how they are called to engage with Muslims?
Well, I would say here's a good place to start, is start praying for Muslims first. And you can get Muslim prayer guides to do. And here's what happens. God begins to work in your heart because you develop a love for love. I'm talking about the church. I don't know about this. I always get them praying for Muslims first. Then God starts working in their hearts. And he gets a love for Muslims because God is leading them how to pray, and he's putting the compassion in their hearts, and I think you have to be driven by compassion because this is a difficult thing. This is not entry-level evangelism.
Yes.
This is I don't call it graduate school. I don't want to make it too hard. But it is, there's a lot to learn to do it well and do it effective. It's not like evangelizing the friend you grew up with. There's very different worldviews, and I would say try to get linked with like-minded people. Now, that generally is not going to be a lot of people in your individual church.
Yes.
So you got to find people and organizations, and like in our ministry, we have area coordinators, and they do the linking for you, and they provide a space there that can to encourage you. You need encouragement.
Yes.
You need to have people. You need to have people praying for you, and that kind of thing. And so I think there are a lot of elements, but the first person is to find someone who can disciple you.
Yes.
And give me a call.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
I'll be glad to help out because that's my passion. I want to see every Muslim hear the gospel and connect into a faithful follower of Jesus Christ.
Yes. And on that note, I also want to say that Muslims are wonderful people. I love my Muslim friends. I love talking to them. And they actually, and for those of you listening or watching this online somewhere, Muslims actually like to talk about Jesus. And that is a great unifying common ground for us. And so if you don't have to get into all the difficult parts of Islam with them, you don't have to go and talk about all the uncomfortable parts. Talk about Jesus because they actually like Jesus. They actually respect Jesus quite a lot. And so that's always a good place for us to talk to Muslims, even when we don't know how to engage with them. So just a parting word of encouragement there for those of you listening. Tim, thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. I know we engaged with a lot of very difficult things, and I just love your analysis and your thoughtfulness and your pastoral heart. with which you engage with these kind of things. Where can people find your work? What can you point them to? Where do they go if they want to find more material or content that written by you?
You can go to timor.org. That's my website. I am also have a Times of Israel blog, and that I blog on, and also Substack, and I'm on Instagram. It's usually for Tim. It is the
Handle?
handle
Mm-hmm.
there.
Okay.
And so you can reach out that way. I'm on Academic EDU if you like reading academic papers, particularly critiques of Islam. So yeah.
Very good, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And what I will do is I will put those websites and those links and all that
Yeah, yeah.
in the description section of the notes for the show. And so that way, even when people listen to it on podcasts and stuff, they can see the links on there and they can go check it out.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Tim, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And for all of you listening online, thank you for being part of our show. Until our next time here on the Reasonable Truth podcast. Thank you.